Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. We're back on the schedule of trying to do these food prep videos. So for anyone who hasn't been here before, I shop every 6 weeks, and after the 6-week grocery shop I tend to do videos every couple of days that show how I make the food that I purchase last, whether it's preserving, freezing, cooking, meal prep, any of those sorts of things that I do after the 6-week grocery haul to make sure that the food lasts for the 6 weeks, because we live off-grid and we have limited choice as to how we store things and things like that. So when I first started doing YouTube and I started explaining about how we did the 6-weekly grocery haul, one of the biggest questions I always got asked was how we made it work, like how we made our food last the 6 weeks. And of course there's some things that vary between shopping trips depending on what I can get my hands on, but also we don't eat much in the way of fresh vegetables towards the end of the 6 weeks, obviously, because they don't last that long. Carrots, potatoes and cabbages can last 6 weeks so long as they're stored appropriately, but nearly everything else isn't going to last you the 6 weeks. But that's why we have frozen vegetables as backup, and we have some that are canned. Like we have vegetable soups in jars and things like that have potatoes and carrots, onion, celery, all that sort of stuff in them. I don't generally like to can individual vegetables, it's just not really my thing, but that's why we buy the bags of frozen vegetables so that we can just steam them and eat them as well. So these videos came about, I was doing them daily, except that all got a bit too much, and now I try to do them every couple of days, and I still sometimes am a little bit slack with getting them out. So this is part 2 of October's grocery haul. October's food prep and stuff post the grocery haul. So I've already put one out. I'll try and remember to put a link here. And it was the first couple of days post the October grocery haul. This is the next couple of days. So it sort of follows on from that video as to where I film all day while I am using the kitchen in those first sort of 7 to 10 days post the grocery haul. So I point the camera at the counter and I just film anything and everything for the whole days, and then later on I come along and I collate it. I do mostly voiceovers because I have 6 children and it's very loud. It's bad enough doing voiceovers sometimes with the sounds of the animals. So the kids play music, we have fans going, and I don't have a lapel mic or anything at the moment, and even if I did I probably still wouldn't talk while I was cooking and stuff unless it was something specific, because they're not going to last battery time for me to be able to do it the way I do it, because I basically just have a couple of batteries, camera pointing on a tripod in the kitchen, and I just point it at whatever I'm doing and I just film everything. So sometimes there's like 20 minutes portions of filming that you only see 30 seconds of, but I just film all of it and then I collate it at the end, and then I write out notes so I sit there and I watch the video, I create notes with some timestamps as to where I'm going to try and fill it in, and then I come out here, I do this intro, I then do all the voiceovering for it, and then I do an outro after I've done the voiceovering and I remember what I did for that particular video, and I do that for each one. So sometimes I get a little bit behind purely because of these intros, of these voiceovers and stuff. At the moment we've got storms that have been coming and going. It's clear-ish at the moment. I don't know if you can tell how dreary it is. There is a lot of cloud cover around. It's only about 3:30 in the afternoon. So obviously same reason that I can't do speak while I'm doing it is that I can't do voiceovers inside the house either. There's just too small a space with too many people, so I have to come out here. So the weather has to be okay. I do have the hothouse that I can do it in, which has a roof, but it's very hot if it's the wrong time of day, and things like that. So we are working on figuring that out a little bit as we go, but for the moment I'm just a little bit more intermittent than I should. I try and have a video out every 2 days, but regularly there's a 3-day gap just because I don't quite have anything set up. So anyway, second video for October's shopping haul of the food prep and planning for our post a 6-week grocery haul. So as I said, we're picking up after the last food prep video, and this is the next morning when the lemon blueberry bread had been in the fridge overnight. So this was a sourdough loaf that I had been trialing. I haven't tried having lemon and blueberry, and I've done some swirls and some savory flavors, but I've never done a sweet one. And it's been going around Facebook and stuff a lot lately, so I decided that I wanted to give it a try. If you watched the last video, it was very warm afternoon. The dough was very wet, far too high hydration for ease of using, but I am going to go through and cook it anyway. So it's been in the fridge overnight. I've tipped it out of the bannetons into my baker's oven, but it's still spreading quite a lot, so I don't expect particularly good oven spring from it, but we're going to cook it anyway. So I use my Wolstead bakers. I got these on special, 2 for $65 each when there was a special going. I highly recommend them. The Challenger bread pans have an extra set of handles, which would be awesome, but they're also like 3 times the price. So semolina was used to line the dough when it went into the colanders, so there's already got semolina on it before it goes into the bread baker, and I like to score in a straight line down the middle of the bread for my batards. I just like the way that it looks. I preheated the bakers, the Wolstead bakers, in the barbecue for about 20 minutes prior to putting the bread in to help with that initial spring, and then that way the cold dough is going into a hot surface and you get some steam. Some people do add ice cubes and things like that. I don't need to for my standard bread. My standard bread's pretty good. I'll put a quick picture here of what my standard bread generally looks like. But I knew that that was asking a bit much of this particular dough. I cook on a hooded barbecue, so there's a little bit of, ups and downs with that as well. While they were baking, I got moving on to some more of the berries that still needed using. I decided I was going to dehydrate a bunch for using in summer teas. Well, that's the plan anyway. I really like the idea of using some of these scraps and extras to have in teas, because I really like tea. And I'm growing a bunch of flowers that are suitable for teas as well, some cornflowers and things like that. So I don't use my dehydrator much. It pulls a fair whack of power, and it can be challenging to run because it needs to run for so many hours to accomplish its task. The plan is to build a solar one eventually, just like a air drying one that sits out in the sun, but I'm going to put a little computer fan in it to have reticulation of air and things like that. And I bought a bunch of materials to do it. I just haven't got to it yet. But for the moment, this is what I have, so I don't use it very much. I really wanted to try these berries and the mango skins for tea though, so I felt like it was worth the effort of running it. The only other thing I really use it regularly for is jerky, and again, I feel that that's a worthwhile use even if I have to run the generator for a few hours of an evening to compensate because of the value of jerky. I sliced the strawberries nice and thin, placed them on the racks directly to go into the dehydrator. These were large enough that it wasn't really a risk of them falling through. They fit quite nicely. They should dry pretty quick too because I cut them really nice and thin. I dehydrated the tops as well, as I've been told that they're quite nice in teas as well. When I had the strawberries the last month, someone suggested that I should keep all the tops that I cut off and use them for tea, and I hadn't thought about it. They just went to the chickens, so this time I'm dehydrating those as well. I also wanted to dehydrate a couple of the blueberry punnets. Now, the issue with these is that there's so much moisture to dehydrate, and I thought cutting them in half would reduce that, but then they were too small for the racks, and I don't have anything to create a smaller grid. Like, I don't have a silicone grid thing or another metal grid or anything to make it a smaller spacing. So I used baking paper, but I was concerned that that would make them take even longer to dehydrate, but I gave it a go regardless. We were, invested in this. The other thing that I had was the mango skins, so I spread them all out on a rack as well to dehydrate. This will give me a blend of 3 fruits to add to the tea mixes with the flowers and stuff eventually, hopefully. And if I get other stuff in the time, like I'd really like to get my hands on some more stone fruits, some nectarines, some peaches, things like that, cherries and all that sort of stuff over the summer. So if I get more, then I might do another load in the dehydrator at some point, and then I'll have a selection of them. The other thing with the dehydrator is the amount of time required to get such a small amount. This will only end up being about a quart jar worth of dried fruit, and that's not a whole lot for the amount of power and time required to get them. I filled all the racks because it's pointless running it without it being full, in my opinion. If I'm going to run the dehydrator, I want it full. So 3 racks of strawberries, 2 of blueberries, and the rack of mango skins went in and went on. The bread definitely didn't have much in the way of oven spring. It was very flat, it spread, but when I cut into it, it was cooked all the way through, and the actual crumb wasn't bad. It was a dense crumb, but it wasn't spongy or gooey. There were no gummy bits. It was cooked all the way through, and the flavour was amazing. That blueberry lemon flavour in it was just absolutely amazing. So what I decided to do with it, because it wasn't exactly, right for just slicing up and eating, it was very heavy, was that I'd turn it into French toast fingers for breakfast. So I whisked a couple of eggs with a dollop of coconut cream and some cinnamon together, and then cut the bread into fingers, which the shape of it lent well to. I dipped it in and fried it off. It's not the prettiest French toast in the world, but it was an effective way of getting all those flavors into a nice package. So we've got that blueberry lemon bread flavor in there, in the cinnamony egg flavor on the outside, and it was just a really nice mix of flavors, and it worked well. We fried up some bacon as well, and this was some of the maple bacon that I bought from Costco, so it has that lovely sweet flavor to it as well. Put that on top of the French toast fingers stack and drizzled it with some of the strawberry syrup, the scrap strawberry syrup that I had made from the scraps of strawberries, and it was super tasty, definitely worth eating. Even if the bread wasn't what I was after, we enjoyed eating it anyway, and it made a great breakfast. So we ate that entire loaf in one sitting, of course, because that's what we do. Between the 8 of us, when I bake bread, I tend to bake 2 loaves because we can eat 1 loaf per sitting. Next up was using the steam juiced mango liquid. So yeah, the previous video I had steam juiced all the scraps, all the skins and the seeds and stuff that looked nice when I was making the previous mango stuff for the freezer. So I had juiced it in the steam juicer, so I kept all that liquid for today to use. I cut the majority of the pith off a couple of limes. I kept the skin and the flesh. I wanted the tartness but without the bitterness of the pith, and this is the best way to get all those flavors when I'm going to strain it anyway. Like if I wasn't going to strain it, then I suppose you just juice the lime, but because I was straining it, then it was okay to have the big chunks of lime in there as well. I measured out and poured all the mango juice that I had collected. Some of it's darker than in other bottles because it was run through with extra water and stuff. If I was canning it or using it as mango juice, I would have mixed between the jars, the different strengths within the jars, but I was going to add it to this, so it didn't matter because it's all going to be mixed together in this. But I did measure it as I was pouring it just to have a general idea of how much liquid I ended up with in there. I added all the lime as well. I added about a cup of passion fruit pulp that I had frozen and about 1 kilo of frozen raspberries that I had in the bottom of the chest freezer. This mango liquid didn't turn out quite as strong as when I boil up the mango peels and seeds, so I wanted to add those extra flavors in there as well. I brought it up to a simmer and then added sugar. Now, generally speaking, most recipes that you find for cordials are similar to syrup consistencies, quantities, except that you're not cooking them down to a syrup. But it's a 1-for-1, so it's a 1 part sugar to 1 part juice. Now, we don't like things that sweet. It's not something that we do anymore. We probably started out that sweet and have slowly backed off on it just to have less sugar, just because then I feel better about it, I suppose. But enjoying things that are slightly less sweet is something that we've managed to get to. We did do Whole30 for a while there where you're not allowed any sugar, so we got really used to not having sugar and things. Like we don't drink sugar in our coffee or anything like that anymore. So mango's quite sweet as well, so it depends on the fruit that you're using as to how much sugar you really want to add. Like if you're using a really tart fruit, do you want that tartness to come through? Do you want it to be sweet like the fruit would be if it was really nice and ripe and sweet? Like it's a personal preference there. You do have to remember that it will taste sweeter when you taste test the cordial while it's warm before you're canning it up and stuff than it will once it's mixed with water or soda water. So the tanginess, the tartness and things like that will come through more than the sweetness once it's added to water or ice or into soda water, because things that are cold lose some of the vibrancy of flavor. Like when you freeze fruit, the frozen fruit doesn't have as much flavor as fresh fruit. It's to do with the molecules of freezing it and your taste buds or something. I don't know the exact science of it, but when you taste your cordial, it's going to taste sweeter than what it will actually taste once you're mixing it with things. So it's better to err on the side of a little bit sweeter than you want it to be. The sugar also increases the vibrancy of the colour and it enhances the flavour of the fruit. So too little sugar, especially if you're diluting the juice and the fruits, will end up rather bland. But again, that might be how you like it, more of like a mineral water with a splash of fruit rather than a cordial as such. I dissolved all the sugar and then added a couple of teaspoons of citric acid and tartaric acid. Theoretically, with the amount of lime in there, it doesn't need those 2 ingredients, but I use it with every cordial I make because I don't measure exacts. I don't have an exact measurement of the fruit and the liquid I used or the sugar, so by using this, it just gives me more leeway to be flexible like that and to be comfortable doing that. If you like your cordials tart, the citric acid is a great way to bring that tart right up there. It really brightens the flavour of it. So we tend to use that more in the citrus-based ones, the lemon and lime and things like that, than we do in your fruit berry sweet type ones. And the tartaric acid is to help with fermentation, so it decreases the likelihood of your cordial fermenting in the jar, though the acidity of the limes and the citric acid should also do that. But again, I don't measure most of my cordials, so by adding these, it just gives me a bit of a buffer. It gives me that ability to play with the quantities of things that are in there without worrying that I'm going to counteract anything. Now, of course, all fruit can be canned without anything in it. Not all fruit, most fruits. There is some fruits that require acidification, but a lot of fruits can be canned without anything in it. When you can passion fruit on its own, you normally add some sugar because that helps to preserve it, but you can can raspberries in water. You can I'm not sure what I think mango can be done in water as well. Most people do it in a sugar syrup, because if you're canning things in water, then it's going to dilute the flavor of the fruit because the water absorbs some of that flavor. So they normally put at least an extra light syrup in there just to counteract that a little bit, and that's what I find with pineapple. So most of these things can be canned without acidification and without sugar if you desire, but they're going to last better and they're going to perform better in a cordial with those items added. Darryl helped me with the straining and the bottling. We aren't particularly pedantic about it. I used to be. I used to use a nut milk bag or a muslin or something, because Darryl really struggled with texture in his cordials. He had always bought commercial ones, so he was always used to them being completely clear, not having any sort of fruit detritus in them or anything like that. So I did used to strain them more heavily, and then I've slowly backed off on the straining as he's gotten more used to it. And now we use the strainer, but we're not particularly pedantic about it, and the bits of fruit in there aren't going to hurt. So he still sometimes leaves a little bit of residue in the bottom of a cup, but that's fine, and he tolerates the pulp otherwise. So we did it in stages, strained and filled bottles as we went, poured some through, got rid of the pulp, poured some through, got rid of the pulp, and that sort of thing. At the end of it, there's a bit of liquid on the pulp that you can then pour off, and then you can use the pulp if you desire in a certain way. I didn't use this one because it had passion fruit in it with the passion fruit seeds, and they're not real pleasant to add to anything. If it was just raspberries and that would have been fine. I could have used them in a bliss ball or anything like that. But once you add passion fruit in there, crunching through the passion fruit, it's not quite as nice to do. So I use the Muddy Passata jars for my cordials generally. I really like the narrow mouth on them. It makes for ease of pouring. They're a pretty jar to look at. And they fit a whole lot in the canner at a time because they're nice narrow jars. I'm using my Buffalo pressure canner as a steam canner. The only thing about the Passata jars is that they're too tall to use in my actual steam canner. The lid won't close because they're too tall. So 4 litres on the bottom of the pressure canner, the rack in there and the jars in there, and then you turn it on, and when your little steam valve pops up to say it's under pressure, then you start timing, and that means that the pressure is at a point in the canner the same as if it was steam canning, because the steam canners have a steam outlet. This uses the little pressure valve as the steam outlet. And then I ran it for 15 minutes. We had more of the crumbed and fried chicken thighs for dinner. This is heavily requested at the moment. It's in heavy rotation. I will have to do a more in-depth video on it, as I've said, because we've really hit a point on that we love it, and it reheats in the oven so well. So I changed the method of how I was doing it, rather than marinating it using a batter with some eggs and things like that. So I will definitely share it at another point, but we cooked that up. This is what the jars look like the next morning after their overnight rest on the bench. It's a lovely vibrant colour, and part of that's the citric acid, part of that's the sugar, and part of that's the fruit. So it's a combination of all of those things that allow for it to be this really bright, vibrant colour, and the bright and vibrant flavour as well. We had leftovers of the crumb chicken that I'd cooked for dinner the night before, so I cooked up some sourdough tortillas. They're a bit of a favourite here, but they're also kind of time consuming, so I probably only make them weekly or so. I make it all into balls, roll them out. I'm not pedantic about rolling them, I just want them the right thickness. Shape is fairly irrelevant for me. I'm not overly fussy. They don't need to be round, they still roll up regardless. They do make for a lovely, soft, flexible carrier for whatever you want to put on them though. We thoroughly enjoy them. I've made them into burritos, we make them into wraps, we use them as quesadillas, we use them as all sorts of things. Today we had them with the leftover crumb chicken, coleslaw that I mixed some duck egg mayo into with cowboy candy as the flavour, and I had some cheese. Again, it's a real favourite of ours. It's a common lunch meal for us, whatever leftover meat we've got with tortillas or flatbreads from that are cooked up. I had to turn the dehydrator off overnight and run it again for a few hours the next day. The blueberries definitely didn't dry as quickly as the strawberries and the mango, and I had been worried about that. Maybe with a finer mesh they would have dried quicker than on the paper because the airflow would have been a bit more, I don't know, I'm not sure. I haven't really done a whole lot of dehydrating because running it is a bit of a pain. Like the power you required to run the dehydrator is just, anyway. But it's something to think about for future. And as I said, I am looking to get the solar dehydrator sorted eventually anyway. The other thing I worked on was the rest of the mangoes. I needed to get all the rest that the kids hadn't eaten sorted because they're sitting in boxes on the bench at the moment and it's awfully warm. So they're starting to get some bruising and discoloration because of the temperatures and that. They still had plenty usable on them though, and they weren't going bad as such, they were just having some bad spots. So I did the same as before, sliced the cheeks off and put them in a bowl, kept all the clean skins and seeds aside to use, and put anything that was discolored or badly bruised into a bowl for the chickens to enjoy. We give the pigs the skin, but we don't give them the seeds. I don't want to risk one of them swallowing a seed whole and getting a bowel obstruction or anything and then having to have, you know, large animal vets and stuff. Not my cup of tea. So the chickens clean the seeds and then they go into the compost and the pigs enjoy the peels to a degree. Depends on how many we've got, I suppose. I threw all the seeds and peels into a pot that were nice and clean skinned, didn't have the bruising on them, had all the sap washed off and everything like that, and covered it with water. Now this is the normal way that I would use the scraps from mangoes, same way as I do with the pineapple rather than the steam juicer. So I wanted to see what the difference in the liquid was that I got from both of them as well, because the liquid from the steam juicer was mildly mango-y. It wasn't particularly strongly mango-y, so it was pleasant, but it wasn't quite what I'm after for a cordial. So I put it all in a pot, cover it with water and bring it up to a simmer for 15-20 minutes, and then I put a lid on it and I let it steep overnight with anything else in there that I want to add to it at the time if I want to or not. But I like to let it steep for overnight before it's steep, not seep. I like to let it steep overnight to let all those flavors get out in that water. With all the flesh that I had, I decided to mash it up and freeze it into these molds that I have. I use these for a bunch of things, but now that I only cook on a gas barbecue, silicone just doesn't really work. Things burn as silicone. It's just not, it's not the right thing to use in my barbecue now. So I use them for freezing things mostly. Each cavity is about a half a cup. So I mashed up the mango with the hacket tool, you know, which is great for breaking up lots of things, not just as a meat breaker-upper. And then just poured it into the molds for the freezer. I will make a myriad of things from all this frozen mango. I love a good mango cheesecake, mango ice cream, lots of smoothies, all that sort of thing. I do need to look into upgrading that freezer though. That is definitely still on the list of things that we need to sort out. A second chest freezer for, I want to buy the hybrid fridge freezer that we use as a fridge. I want to buy one of them as a freezer. But I'll probably aim to do it more towards sort of, I don't know, January, February, after Christmas, and when we actually get the most produce in from the gardens, because that's when it'll become more of an issue. At the moment, when I shop on my 6 weekly trips and I go to the fruit and veg store, I sometimes get less than I would like because I know that I don't necessarily have the storage for it. But when we've got stuff coming out of the garden, I don't want to waste any of it, so I want to have the space for that, so we'll figure that out. But anyway, so that was the second and third, or third and fourth, or the second lot of food prep after the October grocery haul. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks, guys.